Welcome to Hear It from the Pen. I am your host, Nick Lamparelli, with my co-host, Tony Steuer. Tony, how are you?
Doing great. Glad to be here with you, Nick, today, and you, Leandro.
Thank you. Our guest this month is, I'm gonna do it in my proper Italian, Leandro DalleMule.
Oh, that's perfect.
Was that good? You like
That's
that?
awesome.
Okay.
Awesome.
That. I'll stop my Italian right then and there. Leandro is the author of a book called Leap, which is what we're going to get into. And in short, the subtitle is A Framework for Better Decision Making by Unlocking the Secrets of Extreme Sports Athletes. So, Leandro, welcome to Hear It from the Pen.
Thank you both, Nick and Tony. It's a pleasure.
I think so. These monthly book sessions are, we're trying to gear them towards insurance professionals. And at first, when you look at the book and you read the subtitle, it's like, what does this have to do with insurance? Well, first of all, you're a self-professed insurance nerd. And so that helps as well. And in the conversation we were having before we got started, we talked about decision making and how valuable it is or can be when you look at folks that are, faced with life or death decisions, really stressful decisions, and how they process through that. So that's going to be the topic for this particular session. But Leandro, why don't we start by giving you an opportunity to give the audience a little bit of your background. Who are you and why are you here?
Good question. Yes, I do work in insurance. I've been working in insurance let's start there, right? Let's start from the insurance. Let's get it out of the way. Today I work at Plank, and we solely have customers in insurance. All our customers are commercial carriers and MGAs and agencies, but insurance. Before that, I was at AIG, as a chief data officer role. Before that, I worked many years also at Deloitte, supporting insurance, our insurance clients. So yeah, insurance nerd for sure. That's why I was so quickly to take the title. As we were just speaking about it, originally from Brazil, and moved to the US in 2001, early 2001, to get my master's, and the rest is history, right? There is a lot of Italian, to your point, not just in the last name, but I did get some time to live and work in Italy as well. Not doing anything related to insurance. It was more banking in the good old days when subprime mortgage was a great idea. It was a great idea back then. And, if you look at 2004, 2005, anyway, that's one part. That's the professional side. On the other side, which is a little bit more related to the book, and we'll talk about insurance and risk. If I even have to explain it, I think it's very obvious, but we'll talk more about it. I have sort of this parallel life to some extent where I have a lot of hobbies. The way I put it is I have a lot of hobbies and a very understanding wife. Right, and patient, so I'll make sure she watches this later, because I am, I can't stand still. It has been like this forever. My mom still attests that, and she still suffers of everything that I do. I think it will never go away. I have, again, a lot of interesting interests, let's put it this way. Not, don't invite me to play soccer, even though I'm Brazilian. I can't, right? So kind of growing up, I can't kick
and Italian.
Yes,
there's like 9 World Cups there. Shame on you.
Really bad, exactly. That's 9. I can't, right? So growing up, I could not do anything pretty much involving a ball. I cannot kick. I cannot throw. I cannot. It is what it is, right? I cannot hit a ball forget it. So I always got involved in sort of the alternative sort of sports, right? And I think that kind of combined with maybe somewhat of a personality affinity to it, kind of led me to what a lot of people think are very risky activities. Some of them are indeed, to be honest, but they always always like to control the risk, right? So you can actually enjoy it, right? Because we'll get into it, but adrenaline junkie, as normally, I'm usually, either people say that I am an adrenaline junkie, which is not true. I'm not addicted to adrenaline. I would be addicted to endorphins, perhaps, right? It's a whole much better feeling. Or I don't have a death wish, like a lot of people. Oh my God, right? You want to? No, on the contrary, right? It's a horrible feeling when you think this is it. I've been there twice, and it's like, ugh, I don't want to go back, right? It's like, oh, So we'll talk more about it. And sort of this is how it all came together, right? Decision making, think about business and insurance, of course, and then sort of the other aspect.
Okay, so let's go into this. The book is called Leap, which is actually an acronym. So kudos. First, before we actually go into what the acronym means, did you invent Leap?
I did. It was I was thinking about the topic itself, right? Not necessarily the acronym or the framework first. And then as I start to think really about trying to break down the topic that I wanted to approach, and which is decision making and why sort of extreme athletes or high risk, people involved in high risk activities, they need to develop this sort of a better way to make quick decisions, sometimes even not that quick, but to make decision making, because otherwise they die, right? So it's like the highest stake. Then the acronym came to me. So it was the other way around, right?
Okay, so
sorry.
Tony,
I was going to say, do you want to?
Yeah, I think we're on the same page. So what is Leap? Sorry, Tony.
Okay, good.
That was it.
So as I was thinking, right, the LEAP stands for sort of the components of these kind of decisions, right? So it's not your regular day-to-day decision. It's not like you need to think about all these different dimensions when you are deciding what you're going to wear, right, today, right? They are very specific decisions, and it stands for, the first one will be logical. They have to be very logical decisions that you have to think about the outcomes and the process and everything. They're not just, again, automatic responses. They're very logical. They're very emotional, especially because it's usually, the fact that you may die in some of these activities is part of the outcome. They are naturally very emotional. But it almost like contradicts when one thinks about a logical decision being very, you need a spreadsheet to make certain decisions, and emotional. But they are not. They are very actually interrelated. And I'll explain some of the examples. I'll give some examples of those decisions. And then the A, right, is sort of assertive. They have to be, the assertiveness in the process. Meaning when you make a decision, you better be committed, right? It's 100% in. There's no way back. If there is a way back, it's probably even more dangerous than making the decision in the first place. And the last one, which kind of, it almost like goes backwards, but the acronym wouldn't work. It's their permanent decisions, right? Or they're very, very hard to reverse. That affects how emotional you are in in those decisions, right? And the need to be very logical. Why? Because they're permanent, right? So once you make the decision, you can't go back. So that changes.
It's a one-way. It's a one-way door.
It's typically a one-way. It's like buying a house, right? Could be a very emotional decision, perhaps. You got to be logical, right? Hey, you can't be as logical as you want. Is this house going to appreciate or not? And do I have the money? Or how much down I'm going to, put on? Is it permanent? Not really. You can sell the house, right? It may be costly, but it's not permanent, right? So you wouldn't be a leap decision, right? A leap decision would be more of the other. It's like, think of other examples, right?
Life or death. But even in not life or death, I can think of two specific examples that I think fit that. Would be when a country decides what side of the road people are going to drive on. So once they make that decision, that's kind of the end. So there's a lot of consequence to that. Or like, what kind of electrical power are you going to install in people's homes? Once you've made that decision, you can't reverse that because the entire infrastructure is set up to support that. Yeah. So your background, you were quite honest about it. You did not drift towards transitional sports, but these alternate ones, many of them have life or death decisions around that. So as a risk professional, you probably started your sports before you became a risk professional.
Mm-hmm.
And then as a risk professional, almost took like an academic approach to trying to tie a model to that. Can you walk us through how you began to see the connection and decided that that you saw enough correlation between some of these things that you could unite it into a particular model that you could use?
Yeah, And that's really related to how I decided to even write a book. It was on my bucket list, right? And full transparency, I did not expect anybody to read it. That's why I've never had a podcast like this. There was like, I want to talk about this, and I had the chance to interview like some amazing people talk about it, and in the process and dig deep into their thought process, just to see if am I crazy, or that was the first thing, right? People, that's the initial response is like, oh, you're insane. No, I'm not. I'm actually very calculated. I'm a risk guy, works in insurance and data. So no, it was kind of the dispel and try to explain that there is not, a lot of them are crazy, but most of them die, right? Well, whoever is still alive, there's something else going on. There might be a framework, there might be a thought process, right? So what really triggered that, Nick, it was, and I said, okay, I gotta study this. And I talk about it in the book, in the beginning. I was with my son. He's now 16. He was then probably 14. And we're in the skateboard, and he's a good skateboarder, right? I mean, he can skateboard. Let's put it this way. I have many, many more years of skateboarding than he does. And, and I had many more accidents too, because back in the day, helmet was very optional. So I got like 2 concussions.
It wasn't cool.
No,
it was not cool. Now it's
exactly.
Cool. When we were growing up, it was not cool to wear a helmet, so you did not.
Never. Exactly. Never, right? No. Or using my knee pads. My knee pads were always down to my ankles because it looks so much cooler. Not exactly what it's meant for, but yeah. So he was there. I was there because I keep skateboarding with my helmet because I already had enough concussions, including one skateboarding when I kind of went blind from my right eye for like many hours without telling my parents, of course, why. And it was horrible. That's a very weird feeling. We're there, fully equipped. He wanted to try to do some, skateboarding, just, enter the ball, which it requires you to commit, right? He has the skills. I know he has the skills, right? But you need to commit. And when I was holding his hand, and I being sort of putting the risk, right, management mentality, to your point, right, at work, I said, okay, here's what I have to do, right? Because I can do it. I commit and I'll go. And this is just has been like that. But maybe he needs help. So I tried to eliminate all the risk from the process so he could do it. But he would freeze, right? He was at the tip, and he would not commit to drop the skateboard, even though I minimized the angle. It was almost flat. It was just in his head. He was fully equipped, right? And I was interlocking his arm on his side. So it's like, there's nothing can happen really, right? You're not going to fall. You have the skills. You have the protection. Go. He couldn't. We tried so many times. We tried many days. He just said, I cannot do it, right? There's something in my head that prevents me from doing this. And that's what really started making me think, I'm like, why, right? And then I think about myself. I'm like, when I learned to do this, there was no way that my parents would, or my father would, I cannot even conceive this, right? He's a doctor, by the way. So there was no way he was going to be there holding my arm, or I would have the helmet, or because it was not cool. Nobody was there, right? I just did it, and then I fell, and then I did it again, and I fell, did it again, and I fell. So eliminating the risk wasn't the solution. That's my point, right? It was the obvious solution, but it wasn't the solution, right? I was like, what else is going on, right? Why can't he do it? So then I started thinking about the components. That's the very beginning. I'm like, okay, what does it take? Right? And I start talking to a bunch of other people who does this kind of things, and then sort of the slowly over the course of 2 years, sort of the template sort of came about. It's like, oh, okay, and then there's a happy ending right to that story, because I tried to apply the same and techniques that I learned from these guys, right? Say, hey, this is how I manage my fear. This is how I manage to take the next step. I said, okay, let me try to apply it to the skateboarding, and kind of work. But
yeah. Tony?
Yeah, so let's go a little bit deeper in there, because I think one of the things you talk about in the book is channeling fear productively is
Mhm.
how do you start to do that? Because I know when I did some whitewater rafting, there were a few rapids that sort of put the fear of God into me. And
Yeah, I think
I don't know if I had the
I'm in,
best fear management.
yeah, I'm particularly intrigued with that question because I think fear is the paralyzing thing. So, yeah, can you walk us through some of those elements? Because that's such an interesting question.
Yes. Yeah, it was for me too, and it still is, right? Um, um, let me exemplify this for you guys, right? So we are naturally, as human beings, afraid of sharks.
Hmm?
It's not evolution.
Rational.
It's rational. It's completely irrational, right? Completely irrational. But we are afraid of sharks. It happened here at home. I mean, my wife was looking for places to surf and whatever. I said, no, let's check North Carolina because we want to drive. And she goes like, no, I saw there were like shark attacks there. And I'm like, not in this house, right? Because I run with my still teenager daughter, a shark conservation organization called Teens for Sharks and kind of stuff. So we know a lot about sharks. That's not true, right? If you look, then you start to first get the facts about that risk process, right? How do you channel fear? It starts with a fair assessment of the whole situation. That's the L, right? That's the logical part. Is it logical to have fear of shark? It's very emotional because we all saw Jaws, and after that, like, oh my God, right? But is it logical? So you start looking at stats, really. You know how many people die from shark attacks, give or take, every year in the
and
world?
and like 100.
No, seven, 6 to 7.
7. Wow.
You're more likely to die from a vending machine falling on you because there are more deaths, right? And that relates to insurance, right? That goes straight to insurance. We can go straight to insurance talk. And it's like, holy shit, right? More people die from vending machines falling over or by running, which is crazy, and tripping on sandcastles. So if you want to compare, beach accidents, then shark accidents. 7. The problem is, of course, the media, as you guys know, right? The media goes and like, oh my God, there's a white shark in Rhode Island, and there's one accident that makes the news for like at least a week. So 7. So goes to the logical place, right? And say, okay, does it make any sense? Maybe it doesn't, right? That's the first piece. The second piece, which is still L, but it's going to address the E, right? The emotional part as well, right? That's how you kind of start channeling that fear or managing that fear. Let's put it this way, Tony. You start preparing it, right? So it's okay. If I want to do this, right? If I want to dive with sharks, which is almost a weekly activity for me, how are you going to do it, right? Is there any training? Is there anything I need to know, right? Do I need to become a better diver? Do I need to understand sort of how shark behavior, works?
Do you need to carry a gun?
Don't, because it's useless, by the way, right? You're not going to shoot underwater, right? But there are tricks. There are things that you do to communicate with it, right? And make them stop, right? Eventually you won't, but then you're going to be part of the statistic, which is 7. So pretty good chances, right? By the way, they're not divers. It's even lower, right? I think there's just one diving shark fatality per year on average, right? It's typically the surfer that looks like a turtle. Nobody really understands, but probably, a
Or
distressed
seal,
animal or a seal is like, I'm going to give it a try, right? Anyway, so the second part is, so make a logical assessment, right? Then practice, train, educate yourself as much as you can. And this can be a long process, right? Can be a short, but it's very important. Exhaust, all the sort of the training and the literature and the knowledge that you can, right? And if you can practice, even better, right? And if you have an instructor, even better. So that's the idea, become good at it. And that is going to help with the emotions. The emotions are still going to be there, right? Because we're animals. So, I would say I've been diving with sharks for a long time. And again, on a bi-weekly basis, because I take care of 6 sharks in the local aquarium in Connecticut. And by the way, let me share. This is probably my coolest picture. Oh, I cannot share my screen.
You can share. Hold on
Can
a
I?
second. I'll absolutely let you share.
That
There you
is,
go.
okay,
Let's take a
cool.
look at this.
Let me just show you one. So this is Nacho and me. It's like every
Wow.
Nacho, unfortunately, Nacho died last month because he ate another fish in the aquarium. He ate a triggerfish, and that little bastard killed Nacho. But this is not, it was Nacho actually posing for the picture, which is kind of weird. And this is me dressed as Santa. Kids love it. Every December in Connecticut, we have this, right? I fight for the suit. We're a few divers who can do this. You know, nobody takes Santa from me. During the month of December, I'm Santa, period. And you get the other sharks. There were like 11 at this a couple of years ago. So anyway, I'm not gonna jump in the water with Nacho, and you saw Nacho's mouth, right? Because I know exactly how they behave, right? And they're dumb. It's not like it's not a pet, right? They forget about us every time we dive. It's like, oh, so they don't remember divers. They're not very smart creatures. The point is, there still emotions after I trained and, oh my God, and did all the stats and put all the stats and make this a rational decision as much as possible, right? Yeah, right. Even then, today, sometimes, last weekend, we were there doing a presentation, and there's this guy who's coming, and I'm waiting to actually get out of the water, and he's very interested in me, and it's mating season. So you got to know that kind of stuff. Does it still create some sort of, yes, right? We're human beings. I'm still looking like, maybe, but you know what to do. So you control your fear, right? It's about managing fear. If you get rid of it, which is, I think, the last part that I want to talk about this, then you're in trouble. This is everybody I talk to, and this is a common misconception, right? It's like, oh, these guys are fearless. And you're fearless to be there playing with a 10-foot shark dressed in red, by the way. They're colorblind. That's BS, right? Or I was bleeding the other day in the water because the triggerfish bit my ear, and the sharks couldn't care less, right? But this is all those myths. Are you fearless? Hell no. I'm still super scared. Don't get me wrong. I just know how to control it. The moment, and I talk to everybody, the moment you don't have fear, then you're in trouble, right? Because then you make stupid decisions. So you have to keep fear, but manage it. It's very different things that typically people think about. It's like, yeah, no fear. No, 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 no. Keep it. It's super important.
I'm thinking transitioning to a non-life or death situation. So, but still with real risk, right? So it could be in the financial sphere and the insurance sphere. Since predominance of our audience is going to be insurance professionals, they could be great to kind of take the leap thing. And we still haven't hit P. So I want to try to figure out a segue to get to P correctly. But I'm thinking about from an insurance perspective, I've been in situations, underwriting, where I quantify something, I feel pretty confident about it. And, they're requesting, let's say, $1 million limit. And then I get an email that says, you know what? Can we make it 5 million? And all of a sudden I feel it starts to choke a little bit because it's like, well, that's 5 times this. But from a rationality standpoint, I was already confident going into the million. And it took, I would say, maybe a leap of faith, right? To get up to 5. Can you talk about applying LEAP on a day-to-day basis for, let's say, an underwriting purpose? Real risk, there are consequences. If you screw up, some big dollars could be lost. Your role and your job could be in jeopardy if you screw up in any particular way. How should we think about applying it to really risky situations, just not life or death?
Yeah. It's not just life or death. You're right? And you cannot go back on that one. So let's say you bound that policy. Let's keep on the process, right? Yep. Cruise to 5 million. You bound the policy. All of a sudden, right? You're wondering, what if, right? What if something happens tomorrow, right? And somebody file a claim and etc. So
I've paid a $5 million claim. It's choking.
Yeah, right. Because that goes your career, that goes your job. And you cannot go back. My point about P, I'm trying to link P, Nick, right? It's permanent, right? You bound that policy, at least for 12 months, it's going to be permanent, which is pretty much permanent, right? I think it goes back to the same principles, right? The more you make the assessment, right? If it goes from 1 to 5, the first thing is you're gonna get that feeling, which is great, right? If you didn't have that, that's back to my point about that you're fearless underwriter. I know nobody wants that, right? It's like, no, you want to feel like, okay, I'm not feeling 100% anymore. Why? Because that's going to drive you to, it's kind of channeling that fear to, okay, what else do I need to do? Goes back to the board, goes back to training, go back to more logical assessment about that policy, and you're going to see all the exposures again, and you're going to think even harder. The more you train to do it, of course, as anything else in life, though, it's not obvious, right? It's super obvious. The better you're going to become at it, and the faster you can make that decision, right? But my point is, the moment you start to ignore that, even though you're super experienced, let's say, you've been doing this for X amount of years, right, Nick? We're not going to show your age here, but more than 20, more than 30, right? That's considerable experience, right? You still need to have that. Yeah. The moment you don't want to get rid of it. I think that's the key thing, right? You don't want to get rid of it. If you get rid of that feeling, then you're in trouble, right? Then you start making decisions. It's like, yeah, sure, 5. Why not 6, right? You can easily jump to 7, right? Until you get that again. But that might be way too late. So I think that was probably the biggest insight. It was about the fear management. It's like these guys have a ton of fear. They all fear they're going to die. Every time they're doing it, you get a little numb, right? Because the guy who's doing the wingsuit flying, he's jumped the same place, same rock in Brazil 700 times. Okay, same rock, same one. I said, "Are you still like?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm feeling a little bit better. It's not the same level of fear than a brand new, jump, but yeah, because I know that I gotta keep my coolness, right? I gotta do this." The other thing too that I think I forgot to mention, but we're touching this and talk about how you felt, right? That 1 to 5 million email is controlling the fear, managing the fear. Let's put it this way, right? So you can control the emotions, 2 different things, right? Because you want to use that in your favor, right? You want to use that emotion to actually have the energy to do the extra homework, right? Have the energy to and capitalize that. If you just ignore it, or you just take it for granted, or you say, yeah, I'm cool. If you let it take control of your emotions, then it becomes an issue too, especially on those guys, right? Let's say you have to underwrite that you have 10 minutes to underwrite it, right? Because you're going to lose it. So if you put the time component and the pressure, the less cool you are about that, right? The more likely you are to make wrong decisions. And one of the things I was talking to a psychologist in Italy, she's based in Italy, that specializes in high risk decision making, Serena, and she actually, it's proven, psychologically speaking, that under high stress situations, we tend to make higher risk decisions. This is why these guys, which is kind of counterintuitive, right? And there are many studies about this. And I'm like, no, right? If it's a high risk situation, I would assume that my natural response would be to take lower risk. She said, no, it's actually the opposite. In high stress situations, we tend to make higher risk decisions. Because also when we are in high stress mode, we are not thinking clearly, right? So this is what's so important. These guys are like, they cool down, they breathe, right? They have their technique and they train for it, right? When they know when they're getting I think you're feeling it. And again, experience helps, but they consciously train that to understand how they feel, right? And they are saying, and Maura's comment is correct. That's why they make bad decisions, right? Because they're higher risk decisions than it would normally be. You're right, Maura. they train, which is I think the second biggest insight that I got from these guys, like how they train to recognize the feelings, right? Is it my palms are sweating, or is it something that that I'm feeling like? And you describe it well, Nick, when they're like, oh, I had this. You recognize that, and that's a signal for you to, hey, I'm going under high stress. I gotta take care of it. I gotta manage it. I'm gonna manage my fear differently. These guys know, because again, because the stakes are so high, right? They know exactly, and they practice, right? They practice in other ways, right? That's the climber guy, and one of my instructors in rock climbing. He does it. He's like, I do some free solos, like in the movie with Alex Honnold, right? Free solo on Netflix. A lot of people watch that. They practice free solos to actually, because it gets them out of their comfort zone, so they know what to expect when they are feeling that on the edge, because the wingsuit flying doesn't bring that edge anymore. So they look for another way to recognize their feelings and say, okay, I need to watch this. And then how can I manage it, right? But they have to put themselves in another circumstance, another, out of the box thing, or out of their comfort zone, to be precise.
Yeah, I think what's intriguing to me is, thinking about the balancing out of all these different things. And I think that sometimes people let one component get ahead of the other component. And that's what I'm hearing from you, is that a big part of this is the education component, the preparation component. Then that can help balance out the emotional component. I mean, is that something that you feel people can really apply from the book and the LEAP principles? Being able to balance out all these things.
Yeah, and it's practice, and you practice someplace else. Back to my son, right? What I noticed is, and then I started assessing myself when I drop, right, the ball. And by the way, less than a year ago, I was in the same skate park, and I broke by myself. I broke my nose in 3 parts, right? That didn't it went well, by the way, going up. When I came down,
it still looks perfectly straight, so kudos to
the
surgeon.
It was already big. No, I fixed it myself, and I'm also an EMT by training. Oh, self rescue. So I actually fixed it myself, and then I went to the ER because I wanted to check for concussion. I was wearing a helmet. That was less than a year ago, like in, I think, June. Anyway, same skate park, right? Broke my nose. Call home, like, hey, sorry, I'm gonna take a while. Wife's super happy. But I started looking at me. I said, am I still afraid to do this? Even though I've been doing since I was like 12, right? And I'm 50. So it's like, yes, I am. When you look, you have to look a little deeper, right? I still feel that, and he was feeling it, but he didn't know how to manage it. Why? Because he didn't practice someplace else. Right. So what we start practicing is like, hey, I want you to feel it. I want to recognize that feeling that you're feeling like this. I want you to recognize it here in other things, right? But stop and think about it. How are you feeling now? Oh, okay. Is that how you feel? Yeah, times 10, right? Because now he's scared, he's gonna fall. And then, even though I took the risk, he's still. So when that emotion came, he was better able or equipped to manage it. Same thing for me, right? I'm not doing this in skateboarding, but I'm always trying new things. And when you try a new thing, you don't know what's going to happen, right?
Yeah. I'm particularly intrigued with I think there needs to be a volume 2. And the volume 2 needs to be, and here's how you practice, right? So here are the exercises you should be doing and things like that. Are there resources that are available now, books or any particular academic or someone who has like workbook style, some sort of thing that will allow people to have like a blueprint on like, here are some hacks or some tips and tricks or things that the pros do to actually do the practicing?
I could not find anything, Nick. What I typically find in the extreme sport decision making sort of it is usually 2 things. Either is a story when it was like bad decisions and people died, right? Think about the movie Everest. if you guys watch it, right?
Yep.
The biggest accident in Everest when I think 8 people died, a bunch of bad decisions died, right? So you have that. That's one category because I think it attracts a lot of attention in media, and that's the shark story, right? And you have on the other hand, you have very sort of general decision making, but not necessarily how to practice for that moment when you are facing with something that you're like, okay, I don't know if it's going to happen. If I make a decision, I cannot go back. How to deal with that emotion, how to train for that, right? The only thing that I couldn't find it again, but there are some books and about getting you outside a comfort zone, not specifically for that purpose, but why is it important? Everybody knows about it, right? And it is, but if you recognize to learn that feeling when you're trying something new, and the older we get, the harder it is to do something new, right? Because you're ashamed and others are going to look at you. I have a good friend, my best friend, started to practice Kendo, the sword martial arts, Japanese martial arts, which I've been practicing forever. He just started last month, right? And I invited a bunch of other friends, and all of them said, no, not for me. Part of it is, being ashamed and say, look, I'm 50 years old and I'm going to learn this thing. And the kids are going to look at you and like, you look ridiculous, right? You're making everything wrong. And he said at some point, one of the senseis, in Chicago, by the way, it was like not my neck of the woods. He said, you're doing everything wrong. And he goes like, but this is different. He's like, yeah, I know. But I'm gonna keep paying and I'm gonna keep coming. So put up with me, man. I'm gonna try to learn this. Few of us actually do that, right? Because you feel there's a lot of emotions and you don't do it. But the more you do it, the more equipped I think you're gonna be to make those decisions when time comes, because those feelings are gonna be there. Even if you're being an underwriter for 20 years or being skateboarding for 40.
Yeah,
right?
the feelings, embarrassment, you don't want to look dumb, right? Also, adults, as you get older, adults have a better conception of opportunity cost. So like, take the sword thing, right? Like this looks ridiculous. And at some point you're just like, am I wasting my time when I could be doing other more productive stuff? You're like juggling those things.
Yeah, it is true. But if you don't do it, right, we stay within what we know how to do and we're used to doing. And, that's why I haven't tried, white water, but I might because I'm running out of things to do actually.
Yeah. Tony, you were talking about whitewater rafting before and during this. Can you give an example of like a time when you started going and you're like, if something could go wrong here and we could die?
So there's lots of stories. There's even a saying we had, no shit, there I was. You may have to bleep that out, Nick. But that's what, guys always start a good story with that. I don't know if, in other sports, Leandro, if they use that, but, it comes back to preparation. I want to highlight a couple of things that you said, because it was the same thing for us rafting, is we didn't step up and start doing a class 5 river. That wasn't the first thing. Is you built up your skills and you built up your other skills. Like I was trained in whitewater rescue. I was trained as a wilderness first responder. I had all these other skills and I spent a lot of time practicing and building up. And I think that's the other thing people need to realize is that you don't just step out there on your first day and do that. Leandro, would you say that's really key for people in their decision making to take into that account what their skill sets are?
Absolutely, especially those kind of things, right? Diving, but yes, but at the same time, right, there is always that sort of first step, right? If you also do not make any move until you've done 3 years of preparation for something, you're not going to do anything, right? So it's yes, but that's something I could not resolve, to be honest, in my head, or anyone was thinking about the book and talking to other people. It's like there still seem to be a spark in some people that will go, right? Responsibly, because otherwise they are not going to last long, right? But that spark, and I don't know if it's, and I talked about this in the book, like nature, genetics, or nurture, right? It's something that you raise in a certain environment, and or both of them. Probably is a combination of both, right? There's no answer apparently out there yet, but there seems to be still, preparation is important. I talked about it a lot, but there is like that initial spark that say, okay, I'll go, right? And that seems to be, again, to some extent, driven by who we are, right? Or how we're raised. So I think there are some people that no matter how much you train, they may not be able to do anything different, right? Like that, or make those decisions. It comes a 5 million request. Maybe some people say, okay, no matter how much training I have, I can't do it. Can't do it, right? Send it to the other, to the senior underwriter over there, right? I can't make that decision. I think I found that I know a lot of people like that. I think most people are like that. That's why the first thing they think about when you're doing, oh, you're crazy. I'm like, no, that's the difference, right? But there might be that tiny little spark that some people have that others don't.
Yeah. In the few minutes we have left, I want to bring this back into day-to-day applications. So someone that's not life or death, but it has the leap characteristics to it. So there's risk, and the risk is causing, some sort of cognitive dissonance in the logical appreciation, and there's some permanence to it. Once you decide, you cannot go back on it. So I'm thinking, Tony, your description of the whitewater rafting and how you prepared got me thinking I should edit this video in such a way where it kind of focuses on me, because I started to stare up and imagine this. But this is where I think I'll use my discipline, insurance, and specifically underwriting. I have always thought that the best underwriters are ones that have a broad, they're a mile deep in one particular aspect, but they're broad. Like they've been exposed to, or they've been exposed to actuarial in a particular way. They're not actuaries. They don't want to be actuaries, but they've been exposed to some of the critical parts of it. So they've gotten their hands dirty in some way. Claims as well. They've seen a bad claim go through. So they can link that back to their underwriting and understand certain aspects to it. And I got to believe, Leandro, that's a component. You've brought this up. You've talked about the wingsuit flyer going to free climbing so that they could get a better. They were losing something in the wingsuit, and they needed to kind of get back the fear in the practice of making decisions in that fear. So they went to a completely different discipline in order to kind of abstract a practice session from that. That seems like a necessity, regardless of whatever the leap connection is that you almost have to disassociate yourself from the specific thing that you're doing, but still maintain risk or fear and just kind of operate in that.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think you explained it way better than I did.
I should write a book.
And there you go. That's volume 2, as you said. I'm up for it. You're right. I'm thinking, and you're saying this, I'm thinking, I've changed jobs 7 times, right? If it's the first time you're going to change your job, the first day on the job is going to be like all that feeling that, right?
Yeah.
Next time I change jobs, assuming I will change jobs eventually, but it's going to be the 8th time. I know the feeling, but to your point, I'm also experienced with kind of that fear, right? Feeling fear in other circumstances. And I think the ability to apply, the portability of that fear management, it's something I talk about in the book, right? It's portable. I found out that talking to these guys about the rock, I'm going to go rock climbing because I'm going to feel scared. And the way that I'm not scared of this activity anymore, even though it's my primary activity, could be underwriting. How can I get that feeling? You don't need to jump from an airplane, right? But how can I get and achieve that so I can, translate and apply that to my day-to-day job? I think that is probably the biggest takeaway from the book, right? I've talked about, again, fear management. It is that portability of fear. If I learn here, you got to be conscious about it, right? Otherwise, you're not going to connect those two, to your point. Claims thing may be completely unrelated to, how you're going to write the next policy. But if you are exposed and you're conscious about it, then you can apply it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that makes a big difference, I think, yeah.
Tony, any final questions from you?
Yeah, my big question is always, what is your number one tip, your number one takeaway on decision making?
Good question. I think the as I was thinking about this, right, the logical part seems to drive a lot of the decision making and control the emotions. It helps, coming from a analytics guy, right? The logical part, the analysis, right? The rationality, in my mind, it drives everything else, right? You can go backwards in terms of, sorry, my dog walked in. It's a 98-pound bulldog, so I hope you cannot hear him. That rationality, it drives decision making, right? Sometimes we start with if we start with the E, with the emotions, we're done. If we make assertive decisions like without thinking about the consequences or without the L, we're done, right? Because more likely than not, statistically speaking, you're going to make bad decisions, right? The P is going to drive it, all around. But that would be my one takeaway, right? Start with the logical, be rationality, apply it to it. Even how you assess and how you think about fear, right? Be rational about it. If I'm doing another activity, I'm consciously thinking about it, and then how come I'm going to apply this to my job, right? Running a startup in insurance, right? So it's portable, but you got to be rational about it. If you just make an impulsive decision, when I was just thinking about this, by the way, I remember talking to my wife. She goes like, "Nah, these are just impulse decisions." I'm like, "No, they're not. They're not. No, yeah, you're just very impulsive, and you see some place and you want to jump, which is true." Right? But I just don't jump, right? It's not like just buying candy, at the line of the cashier in the supermarket. That's okay. That's impulsive. Like, I want some dark chocolate. Boom. That's not impulsive. In business, definitely not. If it is, we're not going to be around for a long time, right? Or short time.
Yeah. So, and we'll finish this up more. One of our guests to this podcast wrote, when I am dealing with clients struggling with their spending, I try to get them to acknowledge where they are first, looking at what's so rather than focusing on the stress, anxiety first. Does this approach make sense?
Yeah, I think it's not easy, right? Because again, we tend to lead with our emotions, of course, right? Especially spending, because you're going to probably tell them not to spend, right, on something they want to. So, and that's not good. Nobody likes that. But I agree. It's really starting with that rationality, with saying, okay, let me try to bring it down to earth, right? It's sort of the spreadsheet, right, approach. From there, if you can apply that to manage your emotions, know your fear, control it as you should, right? But don't eliminate it, right? Make it part of the decision. Right? It tends to lead to a much better decision. That's what I found with these guys. They are all still alive, by the way, especially the ones that I interviewed in the book, which means something, right? And they've been doing this for many years. So that's what I was trying to uncover, is like, how you guys are still alive, right? Because statistically speaking, you shouldn't be, because all these guys are thinking along those lines, right?
Yeah. This has been a marvelous conversation. I mean, this is such a fantastic book. I'll put
really
all of the
it.
information for the book in the show notes so you can get access to it. There'll be some special bonuses as well in the show notes, and you're always welcome to come back. I think once we sign off, let's continue the conversation. But man, it was such a good learning experience. I think Tony and I, hopefully more as well, got a lot out of this. Really digging into your book.
I loved it. Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, one quick thing before we sign off is, Leandro, this is a big question. Where can people pick up a copy of your book and find out what you're up to?
Amazon. It's the easiest,
We'll put it in the show notes.
There you go.
So we'll add a link to it along with everything else. So fantastic. Tony, thank you for jumping on and co-hosting with me. And until next time, this is the Hear It from the Pen author interview. And until next time, I'm Nick, Tony, Leandro. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Pleasure.